you, Annie. My name is Adetutu Talabi, and I head the partnerships team at a company called Sidebrief. And Sidebrief is a technology company where we help businesses, SMEs, and tech startups move and scale across Africa. And so far, we have reached in over 40 African countries, and we've been able to take tech really in terms of moving these companies to over 22 countries in Africa. So thank you for this opportunity, Annie. I'm glad to be here.
Say that you're a digital trade champion, a champion of digital trade in Africa, especially trade in services. You know, normally when people talk about trade, people think about trading goods, but for you, you're championing digital trade in services. Could you share with us what you have seen as the potential for trade in services, especially professional services, and how the AfCFTA comes in? So digital trade, trade in services, and AfCFTA. Could you share with us your thoughts around that?
Thank you, Annie. So we all know that services, right, and professional services in particular has the potential to fuel economic expansion across Africa. And this primarily, can be achieved through the AfCFTA. And this area really has the capacity to increase our GDPs. It has capacity to also absorb a lot of, youth population, as well as improve gender parity, because we find women as well in professional services. And the AfCFTA particularly can help us expand professional services across the border in various fields. If we look at tech, for example, if we look at legal, medical, transportation, the telecommunications sector, all these sectors, right, can be expanded, that their services can be provided cross-border, not just in a particular region, but, continent-wide. And I also believe that the AfCFTA can facilitate resource collaboration. And this means that there will be opportunities for cooperation between different professionals in various countries to actually solve continent-wide problems. For example, we have lawyers and financial professionals that will be coming together to solve client issues that actually cut across multiple jurisdictions. And expansion of professional services and even resource collaboration will be made possible because of the provision of mutual recognition of professional qualification that has been made available under the Protocol for Trade in Services. Yes, we talk about digital trade, but people have to move right into these different countries. And so this provision has made it possible for professionals to move across the border and move across the continent. And I believe that there's actually an enormous opportunity for expansion of professional services across the border. But a key determinant to actually unleashing that potential is ensuring that countries actually develop friendly policies that will guide these services liberalizations, because at the end of the day, it is one thing for the Protocol on Trade in Services to contain provisions on mutual recognitions, and it's also another thing for implementation on the ground, right, where these countries will not be protectionist, and they would actually ensure that mutual recognition agreements are facilitated amongst each other in a friendly way, such that there's collaborations between the governments, the immigration authorities, and even the professional private sector bodies that would ordinarily be in charge of giving out licenses, certifications, and various requirements. So I believe that yes, there's a huge opportunity, but we also have to ensure that we dole out, policy friendly services liberation to also ensure that our professionals can actually move across borders seamlessly.
Okay, thank you, Adetutu. And I think that's the vision of AfCFTA, which is borderless Africa, right? Free movement of people, goods, services. And like you said, if there's mutual recognition of qualification, then you in Nigeria can come very easily to Kenya or South Africa or Zambia and be able to do that. And like you said, it doesn't matter what jurisdiction you are, you can actually collaborate with other professionals. And that is what we need, especially in digital trade and of course, other regular trade. So thank you very much for your insights. So for you, earlier, you mentioned that you work a lot with technology startups, right? And SMEs, and you support them across Africa. You mentioned that, did you say 22 African countries. So my question for you, Adetutu, is how do you see the growth of digital trade through the full implementation of AfCFTA, right? So AfCFTA is out there. We have seen things slowly happening. It's moving, implementation is happening. We've seen, for example, Kenya just was able to export tea to Ghana. So things are happening, right? What do you think, like I said, from the tech startups that you work with, how do you see the growth of digital trade and what needs to be done to make sure there's full implementation of the AfCFTA?
Thank you, Annie. Yes, I do believe that digital trade can sporadically improve growth in Africa and also aid development in that area. And for us at Sidebrief, like I'd mentioned earlier, we do help technology companies scale across Africa, and we've been able to help tech companies move to about 22 countries in Africa. And we've seen a lot of those companies go ahead to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in different seed rounds. And there's been potential for the growth of digital trade on the continent. And in the last 5 years, we have seen the trend of a rise of a lot of tech companies, and they have been getting massive investments from the West. And COVID-19 also sporadically improved that growth, because we saw a lot of rise and scaling of e-commerce businesses and also financial technology businesses. We've also seen the rise of unicorn companies, right? And some of which I can proudly mention, because some of them are from Nigeria. We have InterSwitch, we have Flutterwave, Andela, Cheaper Cash, and Wave. And in 2022 alone, we've seen African tech startups raise above $2.7 billion as seed investments in their businesses. However, the trend that we have seen so far is that these companies are usually concentrated in the key markets in Africa. So you find them in Nigeria, you find them in Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, Rwanda, Morocco, and maybe just the e-commerce and the fintechs would actually go into other smaller economies like the Gambia, Guinea, Tanzania, Togo, Benin Republic, and the likes of them. But in order to truly ensure that we experience, a continent-wide growth in digital trade, it's important that the digital trade protocol that is currently being negotiated has to be structured properly. And key areas, as Pamela even mentioned in her keynote, that should be addressed really would be data governance, data protection, cross-border data flows, rather, electronic transactions. How are we going to tax the digital businesses, consumer protection, and intellectual property? All these areas have to be addressed in order for us to actually truly experience that, continent-wide growth of digital trade in Africa.
Thank you, Adetutu. Yes, and also emphasizing about what is going on with the digital trade protocol. I do have to say a segue before we go into the questions from the audience. One of the things when I did reach out to you to speak at the conference, and you shared with me a lot more about what you're doing at Sidebrief, I mentioned to you about some of the things that we do at Regal Africa. So we are business advisors, and we have a lot of people interested in the East Africa community coming into the East Africa, which is where we're really focused. And one of the things that you mentioned to me is because currently we're speaking to a company in West Africa looking to open up offices in East Africa. And normally I would just say I would go ahead, support them with their business, but also introduce them to a Kenyan legal company. But when you shared with me what Sidebrief is doing, which is saying you're in different African countries, I realized that is the solution that we actually want on the continent, which is to say, I have a client who needs legal services, you're in Nigeria, you're able to cover different jurisdictions, you are a legal professional. So different from what we're doing, so complementary, we can work together. So why I'm bringing this out is to say that there is a lot of work that is on the continent, there's a lot of opportunity in trade, in services. We just need to connect, network, know what it is that we're doing, so practically we can be able to support the businesses on the continent. So I just wanted to share what I really liked about Sidebrief, that you went beyond Nigeria and said we are looking at it from a Pan-African perspective. So thank you very much for the work that you are doing. So we do have another question here, and this is for you, Adetutu. Do you think harmonizing educational curriculum is the most urgent element in the build-up to trading services? MRAs may be ambushed by the culture shock inherent in free movement, but education may ease out some of that pain. Your thoughts on that? Education curriculum and build up in trading services.
Thank you. Honestly, it would be ideal that harmonization of our education curricula is where we should start from. But on a realistic level, it might be difficult to achieve that, because if we look at some of the agreements that we have, for example, the Malabo Convention that has to do with cybersecurity, there's a lot that's been said there about coordination, as opposed to forcing countries to, or governments to actually decide and harmonize on a particular idea, right? They are pushing for coordination as opposed to just harmonization, because it's 54 countries and we are in about 5 different regions, and we all have different colonial heritages and different cultures as well as backgrounds and experiences. So I do believe that we should start from where we are. In fact, take for example the AfCFTA. Big countries like Nigeria and South Africa were hesitant to even join, right? And other countries decided to go ahead, and that was when we decided to take the step forward. So I do believe that, yes, in an ideal situation, we should focus on education first. But I want to just realistically say that we should start from where we are, and then we can then build up to that level of true harmonization across board.
That's the vision, harmonization. But in the meantime, start with what you have. Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you, Annie. I think I'll just like to say that, yes, we can all agree that there is indeed huge potential for digital trade in Africa, and it would also create a lot of jobs. In fact, they are already doing so, because there are new skills and new in-demand tech skills that young people are actually embracing, and they're learning and doing all of that. But at the same time, we also want sporadic growth, right? We don't want to remain at the level that we are. Africa is already behind. So I think my charge would be really to ensure that, yes, on the policy side, we are moving ahead, but it's also important that governments also develop key infrastructure, because one of the challenges that we see that digital entrepreneurs or innovators complain about is the fact that they have to be their own government, right? They have to create infrastructure, they have to be the ones in charge of education, reskilling, training their workers. But we know that if infrastructure and a living environment is actually present, job creation would be easy, because once there's an environment to innovate, it would then spur on more innovation, and it would create a large pool of jobs for our burgeoning youth population. So it's also important that infrastructure is in place in terms of broadband internet, as well as ensuring that our education system is also moving at the speed of these technologies. It's important that we reskill our current labor force, and also ensure that generation that is coming now are also being entrenched in the digital economy. And it's also a charge to the private sector to work hand in hand with government, because we know that government cannot do everything. It's also important that we also get involved and work hand in hand to ensure that Africa is truly prosperous, and the dream that we all have in terms of pictures of how Africa would eventually materialize. Thank you.